We all have excuses for not chasing our dreams. As life goes by day, we only get more excuses. Not enough time, money, mortgages, kids. There's always another thing to hold us back. Yet we do find the time to watch Netflix, we find the money to buy a new phone. So there is something wrong with us. Today I have Kyra Condie on the show. She is a professional climber in the United States and part of their Olympic team. Besides overcoming just all the normal barriers to becoming an Olympic athlete, she also has a fused spine due to scoliosis, so 3/4 of her spine doesn't move. Now, in climbing, a bendy spine is generally considered one of the essentials to climb well, but with the right mindset, it's amazing what you can accomplish. So what Kyra has done is amazing, and if something as dramatic as a fused spine isn't actually a barrier to achieving your dreams, I think we can all take a look at ourselves and push a little bit harder. So I was delighted to talk to Kyra and find out a little bit more about her psychology, how she thinks about barriers in her life, and how to motivate yourself against the odds. Kyra is truly an epic lady doing some really interesting things, and it was a delight to have her on the podcast, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy the interview. And we start the episode with Kyra's story of how she got into climbing in the first place.
My name is Kyra Condie. I grew up in Minnesota. Definitely super athletic. I was really competitive. Nothing was really sticking as like my favorite sport. Like team sports weren't really my thing because as soon as the coach told me that I had to sit out, I was not psyched. And then gymnastics was not my thing because I was not nearly graceful enough. And then I found the climbing gym at a birthday party in about like 5th or 6th grade. Before that, I was climbing trees in our kitchen. So going to the climbing gym, I was like, wow, you're supposed to climb these walls? That's sick. And joined the climbing team. I was actually really into musical theater at the time. So then I quit the climbing team and started doing some musical theater instead. And then realized that I missed climbing. And so went back to that. Ever since then, I've never stopped. So I was about 12 at that time. Kind of got immediately thrown into competition climbing. The next year, I qualified for nationals. And then right after that, I got diagnosed with scoliosis. So that's when I found out I needed to get a severe spinal fusion surgery. Got that when I was, I think, 13. It was 2010. Recovered from that. And then I didn't win nationals until after that, actually, for the first time. And then competed on the World Cup circuit once I turned old enough. But I could only go to one a year, really, because of school. Then eventually I started doing well at the World Cups. Climbing became part of the Olympics. I realized that's what I wanted to focus on. I graduated from university, qualified for the Olympics, went to Tokyo, moved to Salt Lake City. Not in that order.
Cool. You make it all sound so easy. Amazing. Insane. When you said as a child you were into different sports, would you say that there's anything within you that even thought that a sport might be a major thing? Or was it like, I wonder what things I'm good at intellectually that I might go and do as a job in the future?
I've always wanted to be a veterinarian as well. The intellectual route that I've always seen myself going. And I was definitely like total nerd in middle school and high school. So I wasn't necessarily the jock type, not like the cool athletic kid.
And now look at you. So when you describe yourself as a nerd, what are the attributes that would you say make you nerdy exactly?
Let's see. I mean, I was definitely in like high performance HP classes and I put you in the nerd group right away. And so all your friends are like the super smart kids. And yeah, all my friends now are like crazy engineers and medical students and stuff like that. They're all awesome. They're super smart. I think a lot of us were like the types who like were slight misfits in school. And I think that's what I mean by that.
Yeah. So as in you started doing climbing a lot, but when the whole scoliosis happened, did you not think like this is perhaps like an unsensible thing to be doing?
I think I was like blissfully unaware of how serious the surgery I was going to get was. Honestly, I think it paid off to be so blissfully unaware. Because I think if I had gotten the surgery now, I'd be like, this is the end of the world. Just like, can I ever climb again? You'd hear one doctor say that that's not an option. But I think being a, 12-year-old girl who like was really psyched on climbing and pretty defiant in general, I was like, this isn't going to stop me. Like, this is totally fine. Like, what do you mean can't climb? Like, that's not a big deal. It's just a back surgery.
Wow. Do you think you were always good with fear as in you're climbing trees anyways? And trees are still pretty scary when you're a 10-year-old if it's high.
I think I've always had a lot of confidence in my abilities. And so it's not necessarily that I'm like exceptionally brave. I think it's more that I'm like super confident. I was never afraid of climbing a tree because I was like, I'm holding onto this tree. It's fine. For me, fear has always come from like if the branch were to break or something like that. So I feel like I was always pretty hyper aware and cautious of that type of thing.
Interesting. Similar traits like entrepreneurship around if things fail like on my own terms, but like when other things that I can't control around me, it's a bit more annoying, as in that you wouldn't want to go and have a job because you can't depend on other things, but you can depend on yourself. Just as a random parallel there. I broke my femur a few years ago and I remember thinking I might be like disabled and unable to walk for ages. And halfway was excited by the concept of things that I might just have to learn to live with. Okay, well, I can maybe do lots of writing, which I've never put enough time into, kind of thing. Did you feel like you might be sort of fully disabled for a while or anything? Or was it always like, cool, I'm going to get straight back into this?
Being 12 or 11 or 13, somewhere in there, I was just like fully accepting that I was going to be back to normal as soon as I could. This is like an inconvenience of something I had to do. And then I actually didn't even notice the difference of it for a really long time. I feel like I'm more hyper aware of it now than I was back then.
What do you mean by you didn't notice it, but like have now noticed it?
When you start trying to push your limits in something, you start noticing the small things that are holding you back even more because you've pushed past so many other limits. So the back thing, having T2 through T12 fused, it's like the last obstacle is almost what it feels like. It's not obviously the only thing that I have to improve at in order to reach my goals in climbing, but it feels like the one that I don't know how to overcome. And so I feel like back when I was a kid, it wasn't necessarily the one thing I had to fix, but now it feels like the one thing that's holding me back. So when it was part of an array of things that was holding me back, I didn't notice it as much. And now as I've worked on those other weaknesses and overcome them and learned that hard work can turn into that, the one that I haven't figured out how to overcome has definitely become more of the focal point.
It's certainly a limiting factor. Still epic that you've managed to just work on so many other aspects of your game too. Do you feel like that's sort of depressing in some ways? Because I think it's kind of awesome that you've managed to get to do all these things, but do you kind of feel annoyance?
I definitely do. Yeah, I think it's hard to put an exact label on it, but it definitely, there's two things. Like I'm definitely super proud of where I've gotten given my circumstances. I'm also super proud of like being able to be a role model for other people who've had to go through it. Because the number of, pardon my language, but shitty doctors who have told a bunch of kids, especially young girls, that, you know, they don't need sports, but they'll have a family and stuff like that. And I was told that when I was 12. It's cool that those kids can have someone like me, I guess, to look up to show that that's not necessarily their fate. But then on top of that, I also go through phases of like not wanting to deal with it. You know, like I am really proud of where I've gotten with it. But of course, like sometimes I'm like, man, it would have been so much easier if I didn't have to deal with this. But who knows if I even would have ended up here if I didn't have this thing to overcome. So
that's a really interesting concept. Sometimes having something to fight is actually really cool. It's nice to sort of, I know, prove people wrong. It's really motivating. It's a pretty hard one to really know what the answer is. If I was to ask you, like, what do you think you'd have done if you hadn't have had like the doctor to prove wrong?
I don't know. But I do think I was like kind of hitting a burnout phase being a young kid who was taking a sport super seriously. There's a lot of research proving that kids who specialize too early in a sport tend to burn out and not become professional. So I was kind of hitting that phase. So having it taken away from me with this back surgery was actually something that was kind of a blessing in disguise at the time. Now, of course, I'm like, man, I wish I didn't have it. But who knows if I hadn't have had it, if I would have ended up where.
That's really interesting. Yeah, life stories are really complex in how we make our decisions. Because you could have easily just got slightly interested in something else and never thought about it again and started interested in something else and now you'd be a vet. Or who knows, which would still be perfectly cool, I'm sure. How do you think about, compared to your other friends now, the ones that sort of were in your nerdy group that are just going out and doing more conventional lives and aren't Olympians, do you feel like they're a bit jealous of the fact that you've really specialized in something and you're like absolutely killing it? Jealous is the wrong word, but just feel like they could have done something more than being more normal? That's a weird question to ask.
I don't think so. And I go catch up with all my friends from high school and stuff, just as interested in what they're doing as what they're interested in what I'm doing. So I would not say that's true. I think maybe it's definitely different than what other people are doing, like what I'm doing. But that's not necessarily like, I think, a good or bad thing.
So I remember when I was like 27, realized too late that I really like exercise. I do like 2 or 3 hours of exercise every day because I really like it. And I probably could have been an Olympian maybe. So sort of work research, like if there's anything I could possibly get into, like physically sort of my size and weight and skills and things. And was like, yeah, I don't have enough time to become like an Olympic lifter, which is about like the only option I think I had available to me was like, okay, you worked this one out too late, Sam. Whereas, yeah, people that sort of realize they have to really enjoy something early. It's cool. And then who knows if I'd probably have given up and done something else. I also realized later that I have ADHD, which has been nice to find out as a 30-year-old. But do you feel like there's many Olympians that are sort of a bit more ADHD type?
I feel like to become an elite athlete, you're not necessarily like entirely neurotypical. There's hyperfixation from the ADHD side. I think a lot of people use climbing as like an outlet or other sports, or like kids are maybe pushed into sports when they're younger if they are hyperactive and stuff like that. So I think there is some sort of gap there. I also know that a lot of Olympians suffer with depression and stuff after the games. And so like something that the USOPC, which is our US Olympic and Paralympic Committee, really tries to focus on is like providing mental health resources and stuff to athletes.
On a complete related tangent, there's a thing called Dragon's Den, which is the UK version of Shark Tank. And I got destroyed because 4 out of 5 of them had no clue what a podcast was. And I was running a tech podcast company. So I still got an offer, but overall I got destroyed. And then afterwards, they kind of started offering me therapy and things. And turns out like, loads of people have like severe depression and it's kind of really bad and worrying. And I guess like people suddenly started realizing that they shouldn't be doing that. But in the same way, I guess with Olympians, you just told to like sacrifice your life, work crazy hard to try and win a medal. And then if you don't have a medal, you get to like 30 and you dropped out of uni or something to do just your sport. You're suddenly realizing that you've maybe made the wrong choices or something, which is kind of depressing. And also just having a serious amount of energy go into something. And then even if you've won, I still don't think it's difficult to know what to do next, perhaps. I don't know. What's your perspective? You're the Olympian.
What I've heard is, you focus on sport for so long so that as soon as you are unable to actually focus on sport anymore, either by your own decision or by not being good enough anymore, or too old or something like that, a lot of people don't know what to do with themselves. Don't have a sense of self outside of sport necessarily. I feel like I've done a pretty good job of having like a life outside of climbing as well as a very in-depth climbing life, because climbing is really entangled, I guess, in your life in general. Like you plan trips around being able to climb outside and stuff like that. So, your vacations aren't necessarily away from climbing. They're like involving climbing.
Yeah, I think climbing is probably one of the most social, as in like I do climbing. It's really nice to go and do weekend of climbing with your mates and stuff. And you can have really good people and quite good people. And it's not really a barrier. It's kind of nice. So do you think that compared to other Olympians that that you're able to hang out more with your friends?
I think that's definitely true. Climbing isn't a team sport. We're all on a team, but not competing as a team. So it doesn't have like the same type of camaraderie that like maybe a basketball team does. But I think in that same way, it forces you to like be close to people in a really different way. And that's something that I really like about climbing. And I think that we all do. It's like we're all quite competitive with each other, but also still like really close friends and supportive.
How much training can you do? Have you had to sort of analytically work out like your peak amount of training and rest and stuff?
If I go to the gym and things feel tweaky and bad, I'll probably take it pretty easy and either leave or do something super chill. If I go into the gym and I'm just unmotivated, I usually try to motivate. But in climbing, a lot of times what prevents you from being able to climb like all the time is that your skin gets that on your fingertips. Usually that's what's holding me back, I feel like, more than anything. It's just skin.
What do you do about that? Because certainly when you start off, your hands are like babyish and they just kind of fall to complete the shreds. But after a while, you just get like proper hard hands. So I'm guessing it's not so bad, right?
I wish. Some people have like really soft skin, super sweaty. And then some people have tough skin that splits all the time. And there's trade-offs to each. Like I never get any splits, but I never stick to anything. So it was kind of trade-offs. I use like an artificial thing called antihydral to try to make my skin drier. And I use that like once a week. So I don't really develop callus at all. Like I have like sweaty hands.
My dad's a lot of chopping. They must be better than my hands because I haven't been for like a month or two. And then, yeah, hands are like shredded after an hour, 2 hours. But yeah, guys generally can do more things with their arms and stuff. And women just have to rely more on their skills and be a bit more, actually kind of learn to be better climbers quicker. So when you were a kid, do you think you were like that in terms of actually learning how to climb? Or were you actually pretty athletic and into all the pull-ups and that kind of stuff?
I climbed in a place that was full of a lot of dudes. And so I've tended to copy their style more. So I actually relied on strength and momentum for a long time. Unlike a lot of my competitors, I'm definitely more strength-based and not as like graceful, I would say.
Do you analyze a lot of people's techniques and try and think about what you could do instead?
I definitely try to. I've fallen into the trap of trying to climb like somebody else before while doing a competition and realized that that's not going to work for me. I have to climb like myself. But learning from how other competitors do moves is really important. I also have that extra thing of my body does not move in the same way as other people because of my back surgery. Sometimes I watch and be like, oh, that's the only way I can do that. Like, I can't do that. And it's like not the right mindset because there is a different way for me to do it. That's how I've tried to look at it now is how can I do that move versus how is that person doing that move? I feel like for me, especially having a different thing that I'm dealing with my body, is hard to fully copy what other people are doing usually.
So do you find yourself judging whenever people are doing a movement, like if that's a Kyra compatible movement or not?
I definitely have been doing that more recently, just because I've become hyper aware of what I'm bad at in like recent years. Watching a competition, I'll be like, that would be bad for me. Like, how would I do it? And then like, can I do that one? That's kind of the debate I go through.
Have there been many occurrences of things where you're like, oh, I could never do that because it's a move that you think wouldn't work for you that you have been able to then go and do?
In practice, I've definitely had moves where I'm like, this move does not go. It's impossible for me. And then I figure out like a slight change and I can do it. I think there are climbs that exist that I straight up cannot do. They're more rare. I think more commonly, I have a climb that is hard to figure out quickly from like my limitations. A lot of times like they're possible, but in a competition we have 5 minutes. So sometimes it's not possible for me in 5 minutes at least.
I'm a really slow climber. It's surprising how slow I can go and still manage to eventually get to the top without dying sometimes. But how do you become really fast? That sounds like a really stupid question.
I'm a fast person. It's like my personality. I think I'm fast because that's how I am. I feel like I didn't like try to do it. People always tried to make me slow down actually. So yeah, I think it's just natural.
What are the advantages to slowing down?
I personally don't think there are any. I think as long as you're making precise movement, I think it depends on your strength. So for somebody who is a naturally slow climber, that's like clearly where their strengths lie. Whereas like I'm a naturally fast climber, so that's clearly where my strengths lie. So like playing into your strengths is super important.
Do you not worry in terms of coming up towards competitions that you're going to maybe do something?
Like get injured?
Yeah. Sorry. Should be specific with my terminology.
In general, like you're always worried about getting injured, but that's definitely not like the first thought in your mind. You kind of learn how to fall well, and that really helps you prevent a lot of those injuries, like not to put your arm out and fall onto your arm. I'm honestly most scared of a finger injury because that's like the hardest thing to train through. Whereas like an ankle injury or something, you can still get really strong with an ankle injury.
I mentioned to you earlier that I have shin splints. Is it okay to do climbing with shin splints?
I think so. I've only had that type where you get your muscles really tight in the front of your shins. I don't think it'll make it worse.
That's good. So let's say you've had a day that hasn't gone to plan. How do you pick yourself back up? You've been feeling a bit bad. What do you do to like psych yourself back up?
On a particularly bad day, my main method of psyching myself back up is to listen to System of a Down or something punk metal. That's usually like my depressed session music. I'm like, okay, this is going to turn this around, and I like feel way better. In general though, like I let myself wallow for a certain amount of time, and then I'm like, okay, that's not productive anymore. And then switch to, a different way of thinking about it, or try to.
Beast mode.
I think it's important to like let yourself wallow if you need to. Don't be like mad at yourself for being sad, because that's just like double bad. Instead, just like process it and try and get through it. I don't know. I think I'm generally like a pretty positive person. If I am sad about something, I usually am like, oh man, I must be pretty bummed about this. I think I'm pretty good about like letting myself have that however much time I need for it, and like hopefully not letting it impede my life too much.
So is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd be like, by the way, pretty weird that you haven't asked me this?
You actually asked me anything about my cats who have been running around in the background of this.
I'm sorry about that. If you had to choose between the cats or the boyfriend.
No, don't make me. He likes the cats.
You told me to bring up the subject. What would you tell yourself as a 16-year-old as a short piece of advice?
Don't listen to the opinions of men. As a 16-year-old girl. There's a better way to put that. Don't listen to the shitty opinions of men. Yes. I think there's a big difference between like constructive criticism and criticism in general. It's a slight difference, like if somebody's telling you that you're not making friends because you're being too competitive or something, that's constructive criticism. Like that's something you'd want to change about yourself. But if you're a 16-year-old girl and people are telling you that you're too confident, that's just detrimental to 16-year-old girls' confidence, which is not something that we should be doing. We should be uplifting young women's confidence, especially. And so I think that's like one of my main pieces of advice in general is to try and really notice the difference between constructive criticism that is aimed to help you and just straight up criticism that is aimed to hurt you.
The example you picked up on there was confidence. Was that a specific thing you struggled with, do you think? Because it sounds like you're pretty keen to back yourself.
I had a lot of confidence, and that was off-putting to people who were older than me, especially men. And it was more the opposite, that I was told I was like too arrogant or something when I was a kid. And looking back, I was nice to everybody. It wasn't like I was conceited or anything like that. It's definitely something I've always been hyper aware of because of these men bringing it up to me when I was a kid. But looking back, it just makes me mad because, I wasn't a confident 16-year-old or 12-year-old or whatever. And, that if I was any less confident, it totally could have just ruined that and like kind of destroyed me. So that's definitely something I try to instill in young women, is that it's good to be confident. And if it gets mistaken as arrogance, that's their problem. Be nice to everybody, obviously. Don't be cocky, but, being confident is different.
Do you ever feel like you're a bit too overly motivating sometimes to some people if they're like, oh, I can't manage this? And you're like, hey, I could do this. I've got every reason to not manage it. So you obviously can, or do you not play that card too much?
I hope I'm not like that, but I've definitely had people be like, oh, well, like if you can do it with this thing, like then I should be able to do that. I'm like, well, people are different. Everybody's dealing with their own thing.
Quick topic change. What's one of the kindest things someone has done for you?
When I was at the Olympics, since nobody could come and watch, we actually got a bunch of letters. Allison, my roommate, she collected a bunch of letters from all like my friends here at home, like in Salt Lake, and sent them with me like to Tokyo, and a bunch of people sent letters to me like in the village. And like half of them made me cry. So those are all really nice. I still have all of them too.
I love letters. I'm a massive advocate for sending letters. Have you tried sending more letters because of that?
I definitely am a big advocate for letters as well, but most of my friends live around here, so it hasn't come up too often.
If you're going to die at some point in the next year, or they're going to tell you when, and you had to leave a message, not like, oh, I love you, mum, etc., what do you leave to the world?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard question. I don't know if I could answer that one without more thought. I'm not going to lie. Maybe just a classic be yourself. I don't know what it's from. But it's be yourself. Everyone else is already taken.
Epic message. And every time I hear it, it just nudges me slightly more to be a bit more nuts. And it's usually a good thing. Pretty happy with that. Nice. Anyway, you need to get going. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been absolutely delightful. You're a living legend. And I'm very keen to see what you do with the next 25 years of life. You're 25, 26, 27?
25. I turned 26 super soon, though.
Oh, yeah? Cool. Happy birthday soon. You're going to smash it. And plenty of cool things to come up.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Well, what a legend Kyra was. And if you enjoyed her talking, she has recently launched her own podcast called Circle Up with Alison Vest. And she's just such a good example of the benefits of focusing on your strength and not letting your weaknesses hold you back. It's such an important topic and an area that so many of us overlook. So if you feel like reflecting on things after this, you might want to take some time to think about your own professional or personal life and think about your strengths that you really haven't maximized yet, and perhaps some of the weaknesses that you're using as an excuse to hold you back from really making the most of the strengths that you have. And now, if you enjoyed the show, please leave a good rating so that my mum will stop telling me to get a job, and on that, enjoy the week. Life is, of course, to be enjoyed, and that starts with enjoying today. So be nice to yourself, and whilst you're at it, be nice to someone else too. Thanks a lot.